This is going to be a slightly longer episode than usual, so I'll forego the usual entree and get straight to the meat and potatoes. I hope to lighten my monologue by the way of introducing a different voice, and I've brought in my friend Em to the podcast studio to be my special master of ceremonies. Is that okay, Em?
Sure thing, Greg. This is really exciting, so thanks for asking me to help out.
So, with a freshly steaming script ejected from the bowels of my computer, let's crack on.
The episode title is The Prescient, Viewed from the Future.
I'm going to look back 10 years to around 2014-2015, and to my first ever home-produced album. Called Prescient, it was written and performed along with Martin Hale. Martin has steadfastly declined to provide me with any recorded commentary about the project, but over several cups of coffee and tea, we have interrogated each other and squeezed our few remaining memory cells for some behind-the-scenes stories about the making of that album. For example, it's become a bit of a joke that neither of us can remember how we actually met, other than it being sometime late in 2013, and it happened via an online site for musicians, though we can't agree on which website it was. He had listened to my first and only album from 2002 and had liked the songs and guitar playing, and then he sent me a message suggesting a meetup. Despite our natural and hard-won skepticism about the likelihood of anything positive coming from such a meeting, Martin and I really clicked from the get-go. We were both born in the UK in the early 1950s, were natural wanderers around the globe, and were now both retired on Queensland's Gold Coast. We were soon meeting once a week, having a coffee and a laugh, playing our guitars and talking about music, the artists we liked, styles, equipment, songs and musical structure. Martin has a gift for great lead guitar. My strength is fingerpicking, and we both prefer jazzy extended chords. We accepted that neither of us had the voice of a lead singer, but with no other options available to us, we were both willing to sing if we had to, which itself is quite unusual. Martin had an Ovation electroacoustic plus a Fender Strat. I had a Takamine 12-string electroacoustic. More importantly, we had a shared history and shorthand arising from 50 years of listening to and analysing some of the greatest artists and music of the modern era. However, the one thing about which we were both in total agreement was that neither of us had any desire to perform in public. We were happiest just playing in private for the pure enjoyment of making music. Towards the end of that first year, during which we developed a large repertoire of covers, I stumbled across an advert for one of Australia's prestige music events, the Vanda and Young Song Competition. And I laid down the challenge to Martin that we should each try to come up with a song and would submit whichever we decided was the better. Much to our surprise, at the very next meeting, we each brought a freshly written song to the table. Martin's was called Scent of Summer. It was remarkably sophisticated for any first ever songwriting exercise. Mine was called You and I. We each liked them both a lot, which further cemented the fact that we shared so much in common regarding our musical tastes. However, my song was still a work in progress, while Martin's song was 100% complete. So we committed to the task of recording Scent of Summer as best we could, so we could submit it before the competition deadline just a few weeks hence. As a side note here, I'll mention it is often written in song competition rules and guidelines that any submitted song will be judged purely on its merits. Easy to say but impossible to prove, and I reckon it's airy-fairy la-la rubbish. It is simply human nature to prefer a well-produced track over any raw demo.
That's a bit like apples and oranges.
Dead right, Em. We decided that I should dust off the software I already owned and try to make a reasonable recording of Scent of Summer as best we could.
So, what did each of you bring to the collaboration?
As individuals, Martin and I were well aware that we had different strengths, sensibilities, and playing styles. And it would soon become apparent that we also had a very different approach to writing, arranging, mixing, and production. We had now each just written a song on our own, and oddly enough, we would continue to write completely on our own. The other person would be a sounding board, providing critiques and suggestions, especially when it came to recording and mixing. Neither of us would ever pull our punches, but the ultimate decision would always remain with the writer. Our first two songs for the competition acted as a creative springboard. we each felt we had much more in the tank, so we decided that we should keep going and aim for an album's worth of material. To remove any possible concern, pressure, or future ill will, we agreed at the outset that all the writing and the production would be attributed 50-50, no matter the amount of individual input or effort. And the reality was that we not only wrote the songs on our own, but then eventually also produced our own songs separately in our respective homes. By the end, and by good fortune, we had in fact each contributed half the album's material. Rather than the track order listed in the episode notes, I'll present and discuss the tracks in the order they were recorded, more or less, at least as far as we can remember what happened. Scent of Summer, the catalyst for the whole album, was the first one recorded. We had to get it done, if only for the looming deadline of the song competition. We recorded it at my house using Pro Tools 8 on my Windows 7 laptop. Remember, this was back in 2014. Martin was a seasoned stage performer, but had never before seen a DAW, let alone used one. And although Pro Tools was installed on my computer, and I'd watched some of the including training videos, I had never actually used it for any specific real-world purpose. How hard could it be? It turned out to be a painfully slow process, fraught with errors, false starts, bumbling and fumbling, and we often got lost amongst the hundreds of available options for every step along the way. Probably the most common scenarios we encountered were, why isn't this recording? And why can't we hear what we've just recorded? Patience and perseverance became the new mantra. Newbie mistakes included singing into the condenser microphone, but realizing later I had forgotten to remove its protective plastic cover. Oh, how we laughed. My conversion unit at that time was a DigiDesign M-Box 2, the classic blue box, with 2 analog inputs plus MIDI. Though the first and only time we ever used both inputs was for one song section where Martin and I actually played guitar simultaneously. Tutorials all indicated that EQ and compression were the key plugins, but all of our early experiments involved random button pressing and knob twirling, with little to no understanding of the what or the why. And it was only at the extremes that we could actually hear their effect via changes in the audio. But hey, you have to start somewhere, and it's only by doing that you learn any new manual skill. Despite the horror stories and laugh-out-loud mistakes, we both enjoyed immersing ourselves in the possibilities afforded by home studio technology. And once Martin had witnessed what was achieved in Pro Tools with this initial track, he straight away invested in Logic Pro for his own Apple Mac setup, and also bought an Apogee Duet as his interface. He would much later take the original Scent of Summer stems exported from my Pro Tools session and remix the song himself. Ditto for Running from Red, also originally put together on my system. All of Martin's other tracks were recorded and mixed directly by him from scratch at home on his own. Fortunately, by 2014, YouTube had matured to a point where there were now several channels devoted to tutorials about using our respective DAWs, and we each favoured different presenters covering our different systems. But we shared and discussed the key learnings. We slowly but steadily developed a base gut understanding of EQ and compression, as well as smarter ways to mix. There was no escaping the fact that we had each separately recorded and mixed 6 tracks. How would they coexist on the album? Once everything had been recorded, we would both eventually tackle the tricky subject of mastering. Often referred to in mystical tones by commercial producers as a black art, mastering, it is indeed a completely separate box of tricks. However, both Martin and I took a common sense we are not technicians approach that, provided the mixes sounded okay, then all that mastering needs to do is to spray a little shine on the top. A tweaking of EQ so that all tracks would have the same general tone, and some final compression to ensure all tracks had the same maximum loudness. Both these tweaks were achieved using presets within Ozone's Isotope plugin, and the quality was specifically commented on by a reviewer from New Zealand who expressed his joy of having dynamic range in a recording. And so by the end of the album process, a full year's journey in music and technology, we two strangers had forged a strong bond in the fire of battle. There had been no storming out of rooms or feathers ruffled, no voices raised, no punches thrown, and that new friendship continues to this day, 10 years on. I think that most people outside of music would be surprised to discover how rare it is to find a good collaborator. These are my top 10 positives, all equally important, about working with Martin. He was
1.
A skilled musician and also willing to sing.
2.
Into similar music to me.
3.
Willing to learn new skills.
4.
Willing to put in consistent effort and deliver on promises.
5.
Able to share a joke and also laugh at himself.
6.
Disinterested in performing.
7.
Not seeking fame or money.
8.
Realistic about the likelihood of our work ever being heard.
9.
Willing to tackle new and increasingly harder challenges.
And lastly, 10.
Able to discuss, collaborate, make decisions, with constant positivity and without rancour. Thanks, Martin. Over my own 50-year-plus journey in music, I had only ever previously found one other person with whom music was both delightful and constructive. That was Mike Levy in 1991 and led to my first album, Not All It Seems, in 2002. The second collaborator was Martin Hale in 2013 and led to my second album, Prescient, released in 2015, and they both continue as good friends and fellow musicians.
Production notes on each of the album's 12 tracks.
I'll present the tracks in the approximate order they were created, although keep in mind they were still being edited, tweaked, remixed and remastered up to the release date of December 2015. I can't identify any obvious changes in the songwriting or production, but I can say that as we progressed, we each developed an increasing confidence that we could achieve anything we imagined.
Scent of Summer.
Scent of Summer represents a first in several categories. It was Martin's first ever songwriting achievement. It was my first ever serious use of Pro Tools. And it was our first recording together and our first home studio production. Martin had been watching someone on YouTube demonstrating weird chord inversions, and one of them kicked off this song. He discovered, while we were actually recording it, that some parts were too high for him to sing, so he postponed recording to the following week while he experimented and found a better key, transposing all the parts. The main elements were acoustic guitars, MIDI bass, and a drum loop. Martin sings lead, I did the harmony, we added some strings. Once the piece was completed, I created a melancholic and distant piano for a coda. It was a honky-tonk sample with lots of reverb. Martin was happy to use it at the end of this, his own first ever song. As we would do with all tracks, we brought all four ears to the mixing and found we often identified quite different issues. Here's how the final track sounds.
Golden sunset shivering, first time colorblind, always falling. Scent of summer, running riot through dreams. Second nature, so it seems, always falling. Scent of summer, you always made us two. can never let it fail. Now destiny is blowing scent of summer.
So the obvious question is, how did the song go in the Vanda and Young Song Competition, which by the way attracted 1,500 entries? I'd like to tell you we were flown to Sydney, feted at the award ceremony and interviewed on radio and TV. Well, I'd like to tell you that. But in reality, we received a short automated thanks but no thanks email, getting neither a placing nor a mention. However, we listened to the top 3 winners and we both thought, meh. They sounded like the rest of the pop charts, bland, repetitive, overproduced and lacking originality. Then again, we would say that, wouldn't we? Anyway, we weren't seeking fame or fortune, and unlike the winners, we weren't young, sexy or camera friendly. But we had absolutely no complaint. We were both chuffed with the creative process, the song and the final track itself. We were each now surfing a fresh wave of creativity. It had been a songwriting milestone for Martin. I too was re-energized. We were also both excited and consumed by the possibilities afforded by home studio technology. The next 2 songs recorded in quick succession were Running from Red from Martin and Colours Fade from me. These 2 songs demonstrated our slowly increasing confidence in the use of digital recording and mixing, and a desire to keep pushing our own boundaries. Also, both tracks used sound effects, which lifted each song to new levels and perhaps were a callback to our early years when radio dominated our lives. If interested, episode 4 of the podcast is dedicated to sound effects.
Running from Red.
Martin's mother grew up on a farm in Prussia and was displaced when the Russians invaded during World War II. Her family was split up as they became refugees, and they were eventually all reunited in the UK many years later. The unconscious mind often acts like an antenna, absorbing events, discarding some and focusing on others. So while the lyric is based around that World War II family story, the song's sudden genesis in 2014 may have been sparked by Russia's annexation of Crimea that very same year. As only the second track to be recorded, we were still using my Pro Tools system. We scoured the net for drum loops. Martin liked one particular loop, but wanted an open hat in one section to be changed to a closed hat from another section. This was not MIDI, so it ended up being one of the most delicate wave edits I'd done up to that point. Here's the original with open hi-hat. Here it is changed to a closed hi-hat. Showing an evolution from the simplicity of Scent of Summer, Running from Red has lots of extra garnish. The sound of a radio being tuned, a radio broadcast by John F. Kennedy, singing by the Red Army Choir, an additional bass drum, strings, plus a battle sequence at the end. Here's part of the released track.
Silhouettes in the trees, stealing food from the fields, flashes in the sky, running from red. Can you tell me why? Torn apart, there's terror in the air, running from red. we'll meet at Waterloo. 20 years from now, when we laugh and cry together, we'll remember how. We'll meet at Waterloo. 20 years from now.
Colors fade.
The next song on the creative timeline was my song, Colours Fade. Sitting at the kitchen table, idly strumming the guitar while mulling over climate change and other environmental issues, I was pondering how to put the concept into a nutshell. There had just been another major bleaching event on the Great Barrier Reef, and I was struck by the phrase, "the colours are fading." As often happens, the flow of syllables dictated the song's rhythm, and the first two chords came from something I'd just been playing. Here's the strummed 12-string, to which I added MIDI bass, and an analog drum loop from the net. Crosby, Stills and Nash's live performance of Wind on the Water, with the Whale video up on a screen, had always impressed me, so I dug up some whale song samples, and then, to broaden the appeal, I also added the howling of wolves. An overdriven MIDI lead guitar and orchestral strings were also added when a build was required later in the song. Here's how the released track sounds.
The colors starting to fade, the blues and greens turn to grey. Nervous laughing stops us thinking what we're doing is doing nothing at all. Nature tells us what to do. We can't hear, we're turned into fools. There's something coming on, but our colors fade in the sun. We sing our children a lullaby, though other cries sound so close by. Floating downward, spinning, screaming. Yes, we're slowing, but much too slow for the fall. Nature tells us what to do. We can't hear, we are turned into fools.
The coast.
This starts with my favourite chord, E add 9. Experimenting with exactly the same shape on different strings, I got the second chord, and the two chords together were the genesis of the whole track. MIDI bass you hear is a stack of 3 samples, a plucked bass, a fretless bass, and a synth pad. Together, each note has a discernible start, a shortish buzz, and an ongoing wash. I felt this sound and texture was complex enough not to require more instruments other than the 2 lead synths, which were added later. Prior to The Coast, the earlier tracks of Scent of Summer, Running from Red, and Colours Fade all used drum loops, which we had found around the net. While they worked okay, the biggest issue was having to trawl through hundreds of files to find something that was suitable, especially when the text descriptions really matched the actual rhythm. As well as being time intensive and frustrating to find, the solution was never perfect. For example, the kit sound itself could not be changed, nor the mix between the kit parts, nor the recorded reverb. Worst of all, any change would require editing of the waveforms, an absolute nightmare. The Coast became my first ever use of a newly discovered plugin, Easy Drummer 2, from the company Toontrack. You have a range of drum kits to choose from and the rooms they are played in. You can change the mix and control the reverb. The rhythms are algorithmic and infinitely changeable. You are provided multiple alternative song blocks for any section, like verse, chorus, bridge. There are numerous fills and endings. Any chosen block can be ramped up or down in the overall playing intensity of the kit or a kit part. The end result always remains as MIDI notes, allowing editing down to the level of every hit. Results are subtle with feel. There are ghost notes aplenty. I really can't praise this plugin enough. It made a world of difference for me. No words ever came to me, so it stayed as an instrumental, which is always a relief if I don't have to sing. Here is part of The Coast.
Paint by numbers.
Like most of us kids in the UK in the 1960s, Martin and his sister were given paint sets as presents. Pictures were completed by filling in outlined areas which each had a tiny printed number which matched one of the small array of provided paint pots. Even if you lacked any artistic talent, results were always vaguely recognisable. Other references in the song are Martin's personal glimpses back into a happy childhood and his teenage years. Musically, the track was influenced by Steely Dan and started with just acoustic guitar. The idea of adding a smoky saxophone came while listening to some music by Sade. Here are some of the arrangement breakdowns. Martin had also, at the same time as me, stopped using drum loop waveforms found on the net and was now using the Logic Pro drum library. Here is the completed track.
Stole through the canvas, paint by numbers, think through time, love before life leaves you, buttons and bows, chalk on the grass always, always, always.
Dilmun.
Martin worked and lived in Bahrain between 1975 and 1980. The people, events and places in this song were all real and would be recognizable to anyone who was an expat in Manama, Bahrain's capital. This was Martin's use of the vast sound library that comes with Apple's Logic Pro. The library contains more than 26,000 loops covering every genre and instrument. For example, the Middle Eastern guitar-like oud used here uses just a handful of the 79 loops currently available for this instrument alone. The drums and bass were also from this library. Dilmun was to be the most pop-oriented track on the album. Some of the chords were inspired by the feel of Dreadlock Holiday by 10cc. The rest of the melody and chords fell into a place around those chord rhythms. Once completed, I offered Martin a new ending that could simply be bolted on to the end of his existing song. Purely atmospheric, it tried to evoke an Arab marketplace. Without any oud samples of my own, my lead instrument is actually a MIDI-triggered mandolin sample, slightly detuned. Here is the start of Martin's completed track.
On the beach, Jassim's on the take, on the island up to the seas, Dilmun. Hey. Sand is glowing hot. DAWs are cruising.
It was around this point, after the first few songs had been done, that by chance I caught a broadcast on ABC Radio Australia. It was a debate entitled "We Are Enslaved by Technology." Associate Professor Katina Michael was speaking for the Positive Motion. I was stunned not only by her argument, but by the eloquence and passion of her delivery, which was done as a dramatic performance piece, of which this is a short extract.
We're the always-on generation, mobile, social media, content, instant gratification, living in the cloud. We're the generation that witnesses cyberbullying and viral videos, and as a result, 13-year-olds who take their own life. We're the generation that hears about 3-month-old babies dying of dehydration while their parents raise the perfect online child. We're the generation where 30-somethings forget themselves at internet cafes and can't keep a 9 to 5...
Besides impressing the technology cynic in me, she struck a chord with the audience, which went batshit crazy with applause and cheering. I think everyone is a little weary and unsettled about social networking and the pervasive intrusion of mobile devices. I googled Katina and found her on the staff register at the University of Wollongong in New South Wales. I sent her an email requesting permission to use her spoken words as the basis of a potential song, even though I didn't have a clue yet what that song would be like. I seriously doubted she would ever respond to an unsolicited contact, let alone the request itself. But a few months later, she responded with a brief but guarded yes. So I cut her original 2,000-word, 9-minute transcript down to a rewritten essence of just 100 words, still addressing the same concepts, but better suited to the shorter form of a song. I requested her approval of my edit and also asked her to record herself reading these new short verses. I did so because in no way could either Martin or I match her passionate style of delivery. She complied, recording her voice on her mobile phone and emailing me the file.
Chipped and tagged, stored away, we're all living in the cloud.
I then started to slice and dice her audio and apply the phrases within an orchestral soundscape. Martin struggled with my orchestral approach. His thoughts on the song were almost diametrically opposed to mine, and we went round in circles for weeks arguing, always constructively, but always disagreeing nonetheless. And we let it lie unresolved, or so I thought. Martin came back a short time later and blindsided me with his new punchy and digital soundscape behind Katina's spoken words. The opening riff had just simply come to him out of the blue. The driving bass just seemed to fit. I really loved it, and he subsequently added a new chorus section with a hopeful and softer vibe for contrast. And here is the start of the completed track, which would later become part 1 of
The Cloud Uberveillance.
Misty view, muffled sound. Opting out is not allowed. Chipped and tagged, stored away. We're all living in the cloud. Always on mobile generation. Greed and instant gratification. Throwaway upgrade nation. Freedom? No, optimization.
For tonight, let's try direct. Don't need no password to connect. Stop drowning in this digital void. Save our precious love from being destroyed.
The blue light makes you stay in touch every second of the day.
We realised that both of our approaches, rock and orchestral, although in total contrast to each other, could still work, and that having two strong but different tracks on the same subject would perhaps provide a theme for the album. Hence the title of Prescient, which means knowing or suggesting correctly what will happen in the future, with a particular flavour of apocalyptic prophecy. So, with Martin's version finished, I started to focus on my own, continuing to develop my original, more orchestral version. But Katina's spoken words had now all been used up, and I needed more. So I reused a few of her key phrases as dreamlike callbacks to Martin's song for continuity, and wrote a completely new verse to conclude the story told by both Martin and me, closing the thematic circle. Katina kindly recorded these new words and sent the audio file back to me. My track has 3 parts. The start is atmospheric, the middle is a tad operatic, building tension with strings and a MIDI lead guitar. The last selection is the release, happy children at play, and the guitar used in celebration like a heraldic trumpet. Martin and I thought the 2 songs on the same theme could be natural bookend tracks for the album, and we started to kick around ideas how to close it all off. One possibility was a needle scratching across a record. A great idea, but only us geriatric oldies would instantly identify that sound. Considering that technology was the theme for this song, I was thinking more of powering down to finish. I found 3 noises that were identifiable. I stacked them, made them the same duration, and accentuated the bottom end. It's amazing how lack of power can sound so powerful. This in itself led to the track becoming the album closer and reinforced Martin's part 1 as the opener. Mine was at that time therefore logically called part 2. And here is part of that completed track.
Misty view, misty view, misty view, misty view, chipped and tagged. Chipped and tagged, chipped and tagged, chipped and tagged. In the cloud, in the cloud, in the cloud, in the cloud. The blue light makes you stay, blue light makes you stay, blue light makes you stay, blue light makes you stay. Track what we do, track what we do, track what we do, track what we do. Our dance is stored somewhere forever. Stored somewhere forever. Stored somewhere forever. Stored somewhere in the cloud that has in the cloud in the soul in the soul. Strove for freedom, once held the prize. Look in the mirror, look in your eyes.
I happily passed decision-making for the album's track order to Martin, as I had found this stage quite stressful when doing my 2002 album. After Martin had made his choices, I felt that there was now an opportunity to resurrect something which had been left on the cutting room floor. I convinced, if not bludgeoned, Martin into including a short instrumental organ break as a separate track. This break had been recorded for his part 1, but had been discarded as it had been deemed too prog rock to coexist with Martin's already included lead guitar break. Solid in its own right, the added benefit of this resurrected piece was that it could become a short thematic reprise somewhere in the middle of the album, further cementing the album's overall theme. So this short instrumental was named Part 2, and my orchestral version was renamed Part 3. And here is that short interlude as a completed track.
Turn it off, let me turn you on.
That Bloke Upstairs.
The lyrics came first for That Bloke Upstairs. They were sparked by Martin's memories of his father's battle with dementia. The song is a lament about being confused by the world around you, not recognizing your own family, and perhaps not even recognizing yourself in the mirror. It took Martin a few weeks to figure out some music to fit those lyrics. He developed a Santana-inspired intro, adding a smoky backroom jazz bossa nova in 2/4. followed by a straight 4/4 chorus. There's some spot-on Latin percussion plus Brazilian chants, chosen with care from Apple loops. The results sounded great and very different from the other tracks, and here is the completed track.
I see you every day, don't know why. You smile a little smile, wave bye-bye. It's nice to see you, but who's that bloke upstairs? Wandering in the dark, I rest my eyes. Stumbling through the day, I hear the cries of people passing, but yeah, who's that bloke upstairs? And what's he doing here? Is he someone I once knew? And if I see your face again, will I remember you?
Another year.
I wrote this very early on Christmas morning in 2014, sitting on a bench looking out on the back garden. Christmas is my birthday, so naturally I was pondering the turning of another page in my life. Sort of blues, sort of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the beginning. The whole thing took only an hour to write, my quickest ever song. A few of the original lyrics were improved upon later, after Martin quite rightly winced at a couple of the lines. The brass rock band Chicago was a huge influence on me, and I tried to emulate that feel, although expression via MIDI is quite hard for such instruments. Also being new to this, I used a complete brass section on a single track, rather than splitting the brass instruments one per track like sax, trombone, trumpet. But not too bad in the background. Here's how it sounds on the album.
Day, another year gone. Look back and wonder, where's it all gone? There's so much to do in so little time to make me a mark and make it mine. Put down that credit card, get out of that car, breathe in a sweet breeze, find who you are. Making waves and money ain't everything. Time's on your shoulder and time's gonna win.
You and I.
If you remember, this was the first of my songs written for the album and lost out to Scent of Summer to be the first recorded. Despite that early appearance, You and I would take another 12 months for just its acoustic structure to be finalised, by which time it was to become the very last of all the tracks to be recorded. This song caused me the most difficulty because, right from the very outset of the whole project, I could never get the sections working together. Along the way, there were multiple rewrites of structure, lyrics, keys, tempo and meter, and many of the changes followed helpful suggestions from Martin.
Was that sarcasm?
You know me so well. The real turning point was finally changing the meter to 6/8, which was a real coming home point for my guitar playing. There was also the reality of accepting that I would never get a female voice for the male-female call and response section. Reality sucks. So with time running out, I did one last transpose so I could sing the full range myself. That final key didn't do any favours for the guitar part, so orchestral instruments were added. Here is the completed track.
Things are happening fast.
They can't stay the same
Things are not going to last.
unless we can change.
Please hold me close, safe and tight. We both know what to do,
It's easy to see.
so I'm looking to you.
It can't be just me.
We both know what's wrong and right. Together we'll win.
There's always a way.
You know it's a sin
Take care what you say.
to do nothing and turn away. Whatever the pain,
It's yours or it's mine.
there's so much to gain.
Just give me a sign.
Let's start today. You and I must choose,
The good things from the bad.
or we will lose.
All that we once had.
Me
We both have to
and
try.
you
See eye to
have
eye,
so
work out what
much to do to become you and I.
Episode summary.
So, all in all, Martin and I both hit a jackpot when we met. Although having done what we both regard as a solid album, neither of us could work up much effort to promote it, nor another head of steam to start a second album. We both agree that this was to be a perfect solution to avoid that well-known problem that becomes the second album. For this podcast, Martin and I had to dig up and revisit the old recording sessions from 10 years ago. Many didn't work with our DAWs that had been updated to new versions many times over. Over coffee, we swapped memories and the old war stories, and we realised that we are still a little stunned at what we produced and how collaborative and cohesive it turned out to be, despite us not actually writing or performing it together. We certainly can remember being consumed with the learning of production techniques, how to apply them in our respective DAWs, the frustrations, the red light fever during recording, the joy when tracks turned out well, and the many times we helped each other overcome technical obstacles or share some new knowledge. But the greatest outcome of all is that we can still both listen to the album today with pride, amazement, and real listening pleasure. And that's a result you just can't beat. Here's a review from the USA. If you wouldn't mind stepping up to the mic one last time.
Certainly, Greg, not a problem at all. The review article said, in conclusion, the approach that Greg and Martin took with this project is unique. Two artists working mostly independently on a collaboration is no doubt an unconventional method. But for this duo, we find cohesion and synchrony on Prescient. Though there are marked differences between their styles, each writer's artistic process is honored and displayed in turn, never overshadowing the other and adding to the overall scope of the musical project at hand. And at the conclusion of it all, beyond the quality writing, the smart production choices, the performances, and instruments selected with intent, It is clear that the seamless melding of these minds remains the most compelling feature of this wonderfully balanced album.
That's all for now, and thanks very much to Em for helping out with her melodious and crystal clear voice. Em, by the way, is the M in MS Word, which offers a quite reasonable text-to-speech facility. Listener comments on the episode or the series are welcome, and I'll answer any questions you leave. If you have something to say as a guest presenter, you'd be most welcome to apply via the link in the main show notes. Thanks for listening. Bye.